Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nick, and we are once again back for an episode of Should You Buy It? This is a recurring series that I do on the channel, which basically just gives final review and impressions of Let's Play walkthroughs that I have recently completed, mostly from games that have like a campaign narrative focus. I've completed games such as like Gears of War 4, Battlefield, as well as Titanfall. I'm not 100% sure if I should do it, should you buy it for those, because the people who buy those games probably bought them mostly just for the multiplayer component, which I don't really dive that much into. If you guys want a should you buy it for their campaign modes, let me know and we'll see what we can do. But in today's episode, we're going to be focusing on Mafia 3, a game that I completed on the channel. And I will be the first to admit that I overhyped it when I first played it. This was just based on my impressions of an early gameplay session that I got to check out at the 2K Studios. But we will find more about that in the future. So let's get right to it. So we're going to start off with a story, which is definitely the strongest point of this game, and I would say that this is definitely one of the better video game stories that I have played in 2016. It's just kind of a slog and a pain to get there through the gameplay and all the other stuff, but I'll get back to that in a second. So you play as an African-American male named Lincoln Clay, who is a returning Vietnam War vet, and the game is set in the late 60s, and basically when you return from the war, you find that your adopted parents or guardians, his name is Sammy, is also a mobster who has basically raised you since you were an orphan, and you find out that he is in deep debt to the Italian mob in New Bordeaux, which is the fictional city set in the 1960s, which is kind of supposed to resemble New Orleans. And you're basically trying to exact your revenge on the Italian mob the rest of the game. The gameplay and the story is very gruesome, it's very gritty, it doesn't really lay back on the racial tensions as well as racial prejudice, and just basically an overall down-to-earth real game of what you would expect from the times. And I think that's what I appreciated most about this game. It didn't sway away from the racism, it didn't try to veer away from it, just went kind of deep right into it. Along the way, as you're trying to exact your revenge on the Italian mob, you're going to have to run into a bunch of the underbosses that is underneath Sal Marcano, and you basically have to try to take down all his underbosses in a lot of gruesome ways. The game is probably around 20 to 25 hours in terms of length. You progress through the game trying to slowly whittle away down Marcano's empire, and eventually you have several opportunities to make several decisions that kind of impact the way the game is going to end, depending on how you want to operate your underbosses, as well as it comes to a pretty impactful decision of how you want to kind of figure out or find out how Lincoln Clay decides what his legacy is going to be in New Bordeaux. And like I said, this is definitely the strongest stories in 2016. I thoroughly enjoyed myself, but it's just unfortunate that it's kind of a pain to get there in terms of gameplay, and we'll get right into that next. So the gameplay is definitely the biggest failing of Mafia 3, and it's unfortunate because the game just starts off on such a strong note. And I'll be the first to admit that I definitely overhyped this game when I first got a chance to play it at the 2K Studios. I definitely thought, based on what I played, that this game was going to be a contender of Game of the Year, because I think we can all agree, based on the first intro of the game, the first 3 to 4 hours of the game, it just opens up with so much promise. It's so gritty, it's so awesome, the narrative is just so strong, and the gameplay seemed pretty good. But the problem is, after those first 3 to 4 hours of the gameplay definitely takes a gigantic nosedive, because basically what I talked about earlier with the underbosses, that you're systematically trying to take them down to eventually reach the end where you find yourself face to face with Sal Marcano. And in order to get those underbosses to show up, in order to actually open the mission to them, you have to limit the amount of income that the mob can create. That kind of sets in motion basically the rinse and repeat formula the mission structures of this game creates. Basically, what you're trying to do is, in order to get the mob boss to come out, you have to first draw out his lieutenant, and in order to draw out his lieutenant, you either have to interrogate someone, assassinate someone, or break some sort of supply lines. And the issue that this becomes, it's the exact same mission structure over and over and over again. It honestly just becomes a grind when you get into this section of the game, to a point where you don't even really know why you're doing what you're doing to break out or to lure out the lieutenant or the underboss. It's definitely the biggest failing that they couldn't find some way to diversify the gameplay and try to make you do something else. The really only time that the gameplay switches is when you run into Enzo Conti, another underboss, pseudo underboss that you're trying to take down. And at this point in the game, I was pleasantly surprised that the mission structure finally changed. But for the rest of the game, it's just honestly a gigantic slog through to trying to do this exact same thing over and over again. This repetitive mission structure also extends into the side missions of the game, with all the loyalty missions for Link and Clay's personal underbosses. So throughout the game, you have your own personal underbosses through Vita Scaletta, a recurring character from Mafia II, and new characters such as Thomas Burke and Cassandra. And you can unlock them as soon as you unlock the underbosses, and they actually give you quite a deeper look into those side characters and kind of gives you a little bit more of their backstory and what they're kind of aiming for. And as you progress through these side missions, you get just a little bit more and more. But the problem is, to progress and get more of these backstory missions, you once again have to slog through a whole bunch of meaningless tasks, such as retrieving cars, murdering people, or just trying to rob weapon supply lines to arm the black mob in New Bordeaux. And it's just so repetitive over and over again. I honestly, through my series, even though I wanted to include those backstories in my Let's Play walkthrough of the game, and I did, but what I ended up doing is just cutting out all the middle part that you guys didn't want to see, just once again over and over again. It's just, like I said, it's just a huge disappointment on how the game started off so strong and that just takes this huge nosedive in terms of gameplay. If the game could have just diversified itself a little bit and come up with more interesting missions and mission structures and different objectives, it would have pushed this game from being a kind of average game into being a great game. But yeah, it's definitely, gameplay is probably the most disappointing thing that you're going to be you're seeing in Mafia 3. On the technical side, Mafia 3 definitely has its highs and its lows. I played this game on PC at launch, and I need to mention that at launch this game only ran at 30 FPS for some reason. A couple days later, 2K would release a patch that would unlock the frame rate to your standard 60 and unlimited. I do not know why this was the case. It just seems like a massive oversight at launch that I really didn't understand, especially on PC, but it did get fixed fairly quickly. And on a technical issue, the game definitely has its highs and its lows. New Bordeaux as a city is recreated very well in terms of its atmosphere, its sights, its sounds. The musical soundtrack for this game is excellent, even though I did have to disable it on my channel just because of YouTube copyright issues. It does have some technical issues though. Throughout my entire time playing it, the game crashed 3 times randomly for no apparent reason, which was quite annoying because it makes things a little bit harder to edit. But I experienced 3 crashes when I played it. And some other things in terms of the lows I wanted to note is that some areas did seem a little bit bland in terms of its environmental design, such as the bog in some areas. And there was also this weird lighting effect glitch that just happened throughout the time I was playing, where it would either be night at one time and then randomly it would just turn right into morning, or the vice versa. It would be morning time and then just randomly it would turn into night. This wasn't during the missions, because that's supposed to happen when you progress through the main missions. It just happened when I was just like driving around, and then I'd drift around the corner, and then all of a sudden the weather and the lighting would just randomly change, and it was just honestly very weird. But on the high point of the technical issues, the CGI cutscenes are done excellent. They really help to kind of make the characters seem more relatable, more likable, and just basically more real. Link and Clay is definitely one of my most favorite new memorable characters that have come out in recent years, and the CGI cutscenes with him as well as Donovan are just done so well. The banter, the voice acting, the motion cap, the facial animations, they're just done really well in certain aspects of this game. And at some points, but at the same time, at some points throughout the game, the character models look a little bit bland. So I kind of feel like it issues where there was like a set budget that they had 2K had for this game, and they spent the budget on, and then they basically had to downgrade some aspects of the game, just kind of either to meet a time or a resource limit. So yeah, the technical parts of this game are definitely has its highs and its definite lows, and it's kind of just like a mixed bag that you kind of just have to go through while you're playing the game. Alright, final impressions. So I will be the first to admit that I was wrong when I thought this game was going to be a contender for Game of the Year 2016. My opinions were built on the early gameplay session at the 2K Studios, where I got to play the first 3 to 4 hours of the game, and I think you guys can respect basically the first 3 to 4 hours of the game were awesome. They were amazing. They just really brought you into the city and the atmosphere of the game. It just takes a huge nosedive afterwards in terms of gameplay missions that just become a slog to get through, just overly repetitive. And combine that with some technical issues. Sometimes the game runs great, it looks great, and sometimes it just doesn't. And that's it's a mixed bag. It's kind of weird if you think about it. It's just kind of weird to have a mixed bag on the technical level. So who should buy this game? So the people who should buy this game, if you want a deep and engrossing story, I still stand by my statement that this is definitely one of the better stories that I have played in a video game in recent memory. The people who should not buy this game are the people who are really into the open world aspect of the game, having a variety of mission structures. This game was pretty much sold as an open world game, but it definitely falls short on those goals, and there are a couple of technical issues that you may or may not be able to get your head around. But anyways, that's the end of the review. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. But before we send off here, there's one more thing that I need to address, and that is throughout the entire series, I was getting you guys to keep an N-bomb counter, and I would tally it up, and by the end of it, for every N-bomb that was dropped inside Mafia 3, I would donate $1 to a black charity. So I decided to choose Black Lives Matter, and instead of staying true to the counter, which ended up being around 75 to 78, I just rounded up to $500. So here's a screenshot of my receipt. I also paid for the transaction fee, which it was like $25 by itself, which is ridiculous for a transaction fee. But anyway, so yeah, that's the donation that I made. Thank you guys so much for your support of the series and for all of those of you who are diligent in keeping the count. And we'll try to do something like this again in the near future because it was fun and it's for a good cause. But yeah, as always, thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I shall see you guys next time. As always, have a fantastic day.